Because basic principle in medicine, which now actually there are guidelines, I forget the name just now, it's a for screening tests in a population, you have to have a defined policy for treatment with a demonstrated benefit.
So that is in fact the next question, that whether should healthy population be subjected to screening. So here when we looked up, the Endocrine Society ES practice guidelines does not recommend the screening of for a vitamin D deficiency in individuals who are not at risk. So I saw this, but then immediately on the second page, they are giving a huge list where they should be screened. So there is, of course, the musculoskeletal are coming before, coming at the foremost, but then chronic kidney diseases, hepatic failures, malabsorption syndrome, hyperparathyroidism, so many medications, pregnant and lactating women, older adults with history of falls, older adults with history of non-traumatic fractures, obese children and adults, and so on. So probably again, most of the patients who would come to an OPD would somewhere fall in this, and then we would be screening them. Now the only question,
not necessarily.
I mean, it's
the
there,
patients
it's
will
done.
fall
What
in
I
this.
mean is,
Yeah.
we in the sense, we are getting, we are seeing that they are being screened. So
See,
this is,
Ashish showed a slide which I wanted to stop him there. Okay, there was a man, and on one hand there were causes. So these are some of the causes which he mentioned. And then he said consequences. And I have I have serious doubts about consequences part of it, because consequences are after demonstration of a beneficial effect after replacement, which is the ultimate requirement for causality.
Dr.
I am an
Phadke,
epidemiologist for last 25 years, and the biggest bugbear of epidemiology is causality. You can show association between X, Y, Z. Most of the time it is confounded. Vitamin D levels are affected by so many confounding factors which are also on the causal pathway of all these conditions.
yes, so but at the moment we would just like to have the broad guidelines, say from Dr. Phadke, whether you are screening, you're screening the healthy populations also, or you're not.
So if you want my answer, I don't think I have sent any healthy person to you unless he is part of a third party payment and he himself decides
wants to do it.
to
Yeah,
actually
we have
do
a
the
lot
test.
of people coming in through insurance and pre-employment panels also.
I
Dr.
haven't sent
Phadke?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Dr. Yasnik is saying, and there is no reason for routine screening
Okay.
because intervention does not necessarily help. There are no clear guidelines. The evidence on what should be, as all these 5 different sufficiency, severe insufficiency, all that is very artificial. What people have found out is that at certain levels of vitamin D, you can start detecting that the bone mineral content tends to plateau off. The parathyroid levels tend to plateau off. At a certain community level of vitamin D, fractures tend to be lesser, and therefore these so-called values have been developed based on those things. They have never been
So then
tested in a randomized
do you
control study.
think that a mean target, kind of a target value of 20 or
30.
30 nanograms?
Now, between all this CMI versus CLI versus LCMS, the broad consensus policy is that whatever method you choose, if you choose 40, then you have at least hit 30. So, if you want to at all use vitamin D in testing and say whether it is fairly adequate, a value of 40 would be a fair indicator of normalcy. Apart from that, all this severe insufficiency versus mild insufficiency, it has no meaning whatsoever in clinical practice. Nobody has shown any clinical data on improvements, especially in non-skeletal outcomes. Yes, some data definitely exists on fracture reduction, etc. So I think,
Okay.
so I would rather, if at all there is a high risk person, I would treat and not do the test really.
Okay, now the next question is if you've started treating whoever, either Ashish or Dr. Lily Joshi or Dr. Uday Phadke, once you start treating, in how much time do we expect the lab response? That is, in how much time do we expect the vitamin D to show an increase? The Ashish, you must have read about this.
Oh, sorry.
Can I just touch the previous topic 1 minute?
Yeah.
All the labs that we send are all patient population. We don't have a normal population that we send. So all the data that you saw were from our shoulder patients predominantly. Lily Joshi also made a statement that we don't see the interaction of vitamin D with other extraskeletal manifestations. So let's not carry home a impression that vitamin D is going to cure my diabetes and my asthma and breast cancer. But the association is very strong, and so the plea, like Heaney's article said, that you must use it for prevention rather than expecting it to treat your disease problems. The association is very strong, there is no doubt about that. When you have an 80% population which is ill, and then I take a norm for that population and say that 20 was the mean for Pune, I don't personally want my values to be the norm for Pune. I want to see that 10% population who's living to 80 in a healthy manner, and I would rather match those parents. This is Heaney's argument. This is not Ashish Babulkar's argument. So from that perspective, what I see, I'd rather be compared to that 10% peak. So I do my values every year without fail, no doubt, and my family, of
Yeah,
course.
but Ashish,
So
again,
coming to this
this.
point of, once you have been diagnosed as a deficient person, then you can't just keep taking supplements and expect it to be normal. You must do an annual checkup to find out where you stand, and subsequently every year you will see that your values are improving, and so your dosages are going down.
So your
because
monitoring is only once
on
a
a once
year?
a year, once a year.
Okay.
The values, if I give a sachet today,
Yeah.
the values are going to change within a week. So we don't, if somebody has come to me and he's already taken 6 calcium sachets, which happens very often now because it has really become fashionable to give them, we will not test them because we'll get an erroneous level. So it is important to ensure that, that's why we do a drug-free interval for 2 months holiday and then check. So we know what their body is retaining, because the half-life of this is very long.
So do you think that sometimes the lab, the toxic levels which we are getting could be just because they have been tested at an interval, I mean at
All
a
the
shorter
6
interval?
patients we polished off from that file
I
that we
think
showed,
so.
we called all of them, they had all taken substantial dosages. So even your calcium tablets have enough vitamin D to obfuscate the result. So if it's a tablet calcium that has been taken, we tell them switch off for a week. And that's enough. We get a very accurate, standardized level which can be expected to be justified to give them the treatment. If somebody's taken a 60,000 bolus, then you need to wait for a couple of months.
So then if we report a toxic level, how do you respond? Would you immediately?
The newer guidelines coming from the National Osteoporosis Foundation, NECP, the Cholesterol Prevention Program, and WHO are suggesting that build up the toxic level 200 and more, don't panic. But you must make an association with his clinical findings. Let me tell you a case we had from a patient of ours who was diagnosed with B12 and D deficiency, given the treatment. She did not take the B12, and then she took 1 Arachidol, went to an Ayurvedic person, and then he says, "Arey, but let's find out how much it has increased, then we'll decide to take the next." Now, Arachidol is 6 lakh unit dose. So she went in and did her D levels, and they came up to 140. So they pressed the panic button. She was related to a gastroenterologist who called me up and said that she's feeling numbness, tingling, she's feeling fatigue, she's feeling nauseated, and these are